I recently got married to Matt. Matt has a stepsister, Tiffany. I have met her less than 10 times in the 5 years I dated Matt, as she doesn't live nearby and is not close to my husband. However, she was invited to our wedding. I should mention that Tiffany is very attractive. She is pretty, with a currently fashionable body type. She also dresses well and spends money on her appearance. This is well known, and even though I've only met her a few times, whenever she is brought up by my in-laws, she always mentioned as being very invested in her image. I don't begrudge her this at all. The ceremony went fine, but afterwards, while my in-laws were congratulating me, my father-in-law commented that I looked beautiful, and in the next breath mentioned Tiffany did, too. His wife caught his eye and shook her head, but I ignored it. When Tiffany came over to say congratulations, she looked stunning. Her dress was beautiful and fitted her perfectly, her hair and makeup looked like they'd been done professionally. And she was wearing a pair of obviously designer shoes. Her outfit was totally appropriate for the event. But I was still weirdly upset by how she looked and immediately felt self-conscious next to her. Even Matt told her she looked great, and they rarely talk. For the rest of the night, every single male guest at the wedding asked about Tiffany, who she was, how I know her, if she was single, etc. By the speeches, I was fed up and almost in tears, and even the best man mentioned her in his speech off the cuff. I let it go, went on my honeymoon, and tried to forget the whole thing. We came back about a week ago, and this past weekend had dinner with my in-laws. Tiffany was visiting, and we learned that she had got engaged. She showed us her comically large ring and said she was planning to have the wedding next year and that it would be a black tie event. Before I could stop myself, I jokingly said that I was pretty sure I'd already been to her wedding. I was the one in the white dress. She asked what I meant, and I thought there was no point in lying, so I just admitted I felt she upstaged me at my wedding. She laughed and said, "You can't upstage a bride." I asked if I could wear white to her wedding then, and she shrugged and said, "If you think it'll help." She then apologized if I felt her outfit was inappropriate. My in-laws moved the conversation on, and we went on with dinner. When we got home, my husband blew up on me, saying I embarrassed him by being petty and jealous of Tiffany. He said he doesn't even like her, but even he knows she can't do anything about what she looks like or the clothes she can afford. And I made myself look bitter and childish, and him by association. I admit it wasn't my best moment. But I thought he would at least understand how I felt given that he heard everyone's comments that night. He's demanding I apologize to Tiffany and his parents, but I don't think I said anything that heinous. Me and Sil, Daisy, have been friends since high school, 15 years ago. I started dating her brother, Dan, when we were all in college. Daisy married Matt sometime after I married Dan 10 years ago. Matt and Daisy wanted a baby and starting trying right after marriage, but they were having a lot of trouble. I am talking multiple failed IVFs, multiple late-term miscarriages, one of which was a stillbirth. The struggle went on for 7 years. I have helped her immensely through everything, financially and emotionally. Matt is unsympathetic sometimes. He behaves as if it's a batch of bad cookies and immediately guilts her into trying again. So, it always was up me and Dan to take care of her. Despite many talks from me and Dan, she remained married to him and kept trying again and again. We have had many offers to leave the state / country for a better job, but didn't because we were scared to leave her alone. 3 years ago, I got pregnant. We broke the news gently to Daisy one day. She got real quiet and then asked us to leave. Later, she sent me an email saying she doesn't want to see me or Dan anymore and that this is all too much. We tried to console her but didn't work, so gave her space. 2 weeks before I was supposed to give birth, Dan passed away in an accident. I don't have any family except for Dan and Daisy. Daisy refused to attend the funeral because she will have to see me the day before the funeral, and I called her and begged her to come. I didn't think that I would be able to go through that without her. She hung up on me and didn't attend the service. Soon after that, I gave birth and I decided to move to another state. I cut off all contact with Daisy and started fresh. Now, me and my daughter are very happy and we are enjoying a comfortable life. She attempted to contact me once I moved away, but I ignored her. 2 weeks ago, she called from an unknown number and said she desperately wanted to talk to me. Turns out she finally got pregnant, had a baby boy who passed away 5 days after being born in NICU. Matt is also leaving her and screwed her over because of the prenup. She is basically broke and homeless days after losing a child. I just said okay. She then asked, "Are you really not going to say anything? You are really not going to help?" I pretty much said, "I don't care about you. I don't care about your life. I don't care about Matt. I don't care that your baby died. Just leave me and my daughter alone." And then hung up. Since then she has been sending me multiple emails and VMs stating how awful I am and how heartless and how much Dan would be disappointed. I continue to just ignore everything. I am not going to have any sympathy or help her in any way. I have been with my partner for 7 years. We initially met online, and after meeting in person a few times and realizing our affection for one another, we found it promising to move in together. I moved from California to Pennsylvania to be with him throughout graduate school. All was seemingly well during this time. I have never really had any reason to not trust him. I encouraged him to very much so, to try his best to make friends, or to explore hobbies on his own outside of the various ones we share, because I have my own passions. And I found we connected most when we met in the middle through conversations about these passions, through the act of explaining or showcasing what we've taken in or learned. Throughout these 7 years, he has struggled with very low self-esteem. And though I don't necessarily think of myself as the pillar of self-love, the depth of mine doesn't reach the low perception of his self-value. Because of this, he has seen and stopped seeing both a counselor and a therapist, and has been on medication to help for the last 6 months. Things were seemingly well between us, and continued to be pretty fluid. We continued to share things, and take long walks, and were pretty open-ended about where we stood in the relationship. If one was feeling a bit of an ebb, the other would pick up more of a share, and vice versa. However, things took a bit of a dip about 2 days ago when I felt the ebb and asked him about it. Initially, he said there was really nothing wrong. And perhaps I was just feeling this way because with our schedules we haven't been able to see one another for long periods of time like we are used to, which is true. But the feeling continued to irk me, and when I asked about it a second time, he confessed to me. He had begun talking to another girl from another country via Instagram direct messages. And though things between she and him never crossed the boundaries of platonic friendship, he really loved the initial rush of someone asking him questions about his favorite movie, his favorite album, his favorite book. All things he and I already know very well about one another. I asked if he'd sent any selfies, or anything risque, and he said no, though I can't confirm, because he deleted the messages. A good deal of me believes him, because of how open he was about the initial conversations to begin with. We slept apart, and I just felt really confused the entire night, because I couldn't really resonate with wanting that sort of attention from someone else. If anything, his yearning for that type of attention sort of hurt. It felt like I wasn't doing enough, or giving enough. The next morning, though I don't have an Instagram, and am not on the app, I went to check his using the desktop version, and found that posts where he once called me the love of his life, or a specific post with a gift I gave him that once said, "Greatest gift from the greatest girl," were still on his profile, but the words, girlfriend, or love of my life, were completed erased. With this realization, my confusion and hurt turned to very real heartache. I called him and asked if he had deleted these words from the specific posts, and with shame, he said yes, he did. When I asked why, he said it was because he just didn't want the attention from the girl asking him about himself to be disrupted if she found out he was in a long-term relationship. I guess this is where I asked the obvious and questioned why someone who is just asking about your favorite books, movies, etc., would be driven away by the fact that you have a girlfriend. And he said he didn't know why he did it, and that it was a massive mistake. At the risk of seeming toxic, and I will take full accountability for seeming so or being so, I asked him to please deactivate his Instagram for the time being while we sort through this, his Twitter as well. He did, and though I was feeling a bit of relief about that, I couldn't help but feel a bit saddened that he didn't choose to do that on his own for the benefit of our relationship. He had to wait for me to ask. Which again, just made me feel like such a toxic and controlling partner. Two things I always strive to be so far from. When he got home from work, We discussed everything at massive length, and he continued to swear up and down that these conversations pertained strictly to music, movies, and books, and he didn't have interest in her. Just interest in the initial rush of the attention he was receiving. We read a few articles, and he broke things down to me as his self-esteem has never been lower. Despite his career as a doctor being at a high, and his finances in order, he felt things with his music weren't taking off. And with that came a feeling that he wasn't special, and it was nice for someone to make him feel that way. I felt shame and asked him if I wasn't doing enough or giving enough to him to make him feel that way. He said, I defiantly was. But my love, and attention and affection, became a pillar he could rely on, and got used to, so with new attention came a rush. And he liked that. I asked him if he wanted to be single, and find that rush in dating new people. And he kept insisting that that's so far from what he wants. He wants to remain a couple, and do all he can to work on these things together. Though I can't help but correlate that feeling he enjoys with the feeling of a first date. Which hurts, of course. I told him I didn't really see how we could move past this because there was nothing much for me to make an attempt to work on moving forward. This seems to be a self-stemming problem that I emphasize with, but just don't want to be on the receiving end of the counter effects. So though it is incredibly uneasy to begin to think of how difficult it'll be to begin again, it is just as difficult to think about how difficult it would be to stay and try to rebuild back up an issue that I feel like just a bystander. When it comes to this has all been very painful, and if this comes to an end I just want it to be as civil and as possible. He deserves to love himself, but not at the expense of the love we have between us. I deserve love that is stable and comforting, and not laced with newfound paranoia. Despite this all, my heart is still very much in this, of course, and he has been very vocal about how it was just one mistake. Nothing happened, we can work through this, etc. And I secretly keep hoping he will make a step, any step really, to showcase these words and implement action. Seek a new therapist. Find the two of us a relationship counselor, buy a book on self-help or on how couple conquer affairs, anything at all. Without me having to be the one to ask him. I just want him to have that yearning that he continues to say he has, but instead of saying it, I was him to show me. That makes me irrational or just plain dumb. I believe to be in a state where I can handle either answer. Or something completely different just the same. Do all think I'm blowing something completely out of proportion? Given how this was an exchange of conversation between him and another girl for just a few days. And his erasure of me on his profile was only for about 2 days? This has been a first in this relationship, this has been a first in my life truthfully. I just felt completely vulnerable and isolated. I live in an apartment on the ground floor of a house that was converted to apartments. My neighbors, one street over but the back of their house faces the back of the house I live in, can see my whole backyard and vice versa. My apartment has a whole wall of windows that are on the back of the house. It's gorgeous and is a big reason I picked the place. I love keeping plants and it let in a lot of light. Looking out, there is the neighbor's backyard which is large and comes up close to my place. The property line is maybe 10 or 15 feet from my windows. Once it has gotten to be warm out, I've noticed the husband of the family who owns that house looking into my apartment a lot. Even sometimes I'll look up and see him, look away then look back minutes later and he's still looking. So I started shutting the shades during the day, but that was kind of annoying. My place is a dark cramped shoebox without the windows open. And I can't do that for too long because the plants were struggling without light, so I bought these window coverings that make windows into one-way mirrors. During the day when it is light out, my windows look just like mirrors now. From the inside it looks pretty much the same, the windows look tinted slightly darker, but that's it. From the outside you can't see in at all, it looks exactly like mirrors. The section of windows it's applied to is about 8 feet high and 20 feet wide. After a week of the window coverings being up, both of the parents from the neighbor's house came to my door and wanted to talk to me. The wife was complaining about the windows for a lot of reasons. 1, they were ugly too. It was uncomfortable, especially for the teens and their friends, to have a huge mirror adjacent to the swimming pool. It's at a time that they feel insecure about looks and they have lost interest in hanging out by the pool. 3, in the afternoon and evening, it was reflecting a lot of extra sunlight into their backyard. They couldn't enjoy eating dinner on the back porch with the sun in their eyes. I said sorry about the inconvenience, but I wanted it for privacy. They both pushed back on that some, and I said that I needed privacy because of the husband starting. He started denying it in front of his wife, and so I took out my phone where I'd taken pictures and sent it to my group of friends. And showed her a couple pic tires of him gaping at my apartment and the texts from that time. He got mad and said he incidentally looked over, and the 8-foot by 20-foot mirror was a crazy overreaction. I said that I'd like to keep it, and that I was sorry, but frankly this was avoidable. I think they're both mad because they called my landlord, who brushed them off.